Hi everyone, this is Dan Stolbarger. Welcome back to our deep dive study in the book of Revelation. And the good news is that we're coming out of the long, dark valley that we've been in since chapter 6. And hopefully by the end of this session, we'll be prepared for the joy that's set before us in Revelation 19. So today's session, again, making our way through that deep, dark valley of the tribulation period will be chapters 17 and 18. And just as sort of a quick review, as you know, we've dealt with the seven seals that led to the seven trumpets that led to the seven bowls as far as God's judgment upon the world. And the seven bowls being the last, where we get the undiluted wrath of God being poured out. Last week we talked about the Valley of Armageddon, and really sort of an interesting picture of hailstones being thrown from heaven. I think I would argue that this was what concluded the battle in the Valley of Armageddon, where we have sort of the Old Testament, the prohibition against blasphemy required the guilty to be stoned. And so we have the ultimate rejection of God by the people that are left, blaspheming his name, and God's response is cosmic stoning. And so that's where we sort of left off. But now, before we get to the second coming and the millennium and the bride of Christ and all the things we want to look forward to, we sort of have a parenthesis. It's sort of time to see other parts of this fallen world being taken care of, in a sense, once and for all. So before the fate of the beast and the false prophet and Satan himself being tossed into the lake of fire or whatever, and before the millennium, we're given the fate of two entities which go back throughout time, and it's the deception and the deceit of Satan. God is going to take care of false religion and the world's economic system, worldliness, materialism, that God never had intended for the world in which was created for man. And so we're going to see the religious system, the history of that, going all the way back to the garden, really. And that's going to be Mystery Babylon, the great harlot that's riding the beast. And then in the next chapter, we'll deal with the economic collapse. Again, what props mankind up in this day? Two things. One, because whether people admit it or not, everybody has a fear of the unknown, of the fear of death. Statistics out, you know what they are. Out of every 100 people that are born, 100 people are going to die. And so there still is that great unknown, or the great unknown question of what happens to me. Well, this is where religion can come in and provide a soft landing. And so Satan is wanting to counterfeit. That's what he does. He's not an originator, but he counterfeits the movements and the acts of God. And as you know about counterfeiting, it's got to look pretty close to the original or nobody will accept it. And so Satan's got very good at his counterfeit techniques. And so we'll talk about that in terms of the religious systems. But here in this chapter, God's going to have them removed. And then we'll talk about the total economic collapse of our world. So, you ready? The word of prayer. This is the word of God. Jesus, we're thankful for your word. We're thankful that this book is entitled The Revealing, the Revelation, and not the deep, dark mysteries of the Bible. No, give us sight, give us insight, give us eyes to see, ears to hear, and the courage to walk out our faith. And we pray these things in your name. Amen. Okay, Bible's open. Are you ready to emerge from this valley? Chapter 17. Oh, a reminder, there is a PowerPoint PDF that accompanies this video. Make sure you click the link. And again, usually more material than I have time for. So you can click the YouTube link, or you can go to our website at holygroundexplorations.com. Okay, chapter 17. Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and talked with me, saying, "Come, and I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication." Snapshot. The great harlot, remember it says who sits on many waters. Remember, that is an idiom and a reference to nations. We're going to go all the way back and see the original harlot in terms of false religions. So her reign is going to span human history, essentially, but it will be put to the end in this chapter. So verse 3 says, "So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns." This description we already know. This is Satan himself, full of blasphemy, 7 heads, 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, colors symbolic, no doubt, of the time in which John was writing this. Purple was the predominant color of the Roman imperialism. Every senator and council wore purple stripes as a badge of his position. And then, of course, the emperor's robes were purple. And scarlet traditionally is the color adopted by the Roman Catholicism. So this woman here that we're going to read about, again, she's adorned in purple and scarlet, gold and precious stones, pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. And on her forehead, a name was written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. This woman will portray all of Satan's false religious systems throughout history. Again, we're not told. It seems as if it's interesting today when we look at the terrorists of our day, the jihadists. There's always a headband, whether it's Hamas, whether it's Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or whether it's Fatah, or whether it was ISIS. There's always a headband with Arabic or whatever scribbling and writing on it. Here, we're not told if this is a tattooed, but during the time that John wrote this, Roman harlots would have headbands on with their names. So this is what he's seeing. And again, mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. So this now, the question that we're going to look at for this period of time, will be, what does this false religion look like under this false prophet who props it up to, in a sense, help fill this vacuum, this gap, because the world's gone stir crazy with the destruction, as we read about in Ezekiel 38 and 39, of Iran, Russia, Turkey, and I think the rapture of the church has this world spinning out of control, but it's the perfect opportunity for the beast, the Antichrist, the satanic trinity to fill that void. But again, religion. Mark said about religion that it was the opiate of the people. To give comfort, a foundation, this false religion is built. And it will be made up of, by the way, this false idolatrous religion with representatives of those that have been left behind. No doubt of apostate Catholicism, of apostate Protestantism, a smorgasbord of the other religions in the world. Islam will be dealt a fatal blow during that Ezekiel 38 and 39 scenario. And as I've mentioned, imagine that world. And so this opiate of the people will be a religious, a global, and here's the word, inclusive religion that provides the foundation for the Antichrist to build his kingdom. But we're going to read in this chapter that it has a time stamp on it. It's only going to last 3.5 years. All right, so that's the makeup. But again, as I've mentioned, this woman, this picture of this woman is going to portray all of Satan's false religious systems all the way back through history. And we'll get a glimpse of that here in a moment. Verse 6, I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. That's past, present, and this revelation is future. And when I saw her, this great harlot, I marveled with great amazement. John is stunned by what he's seeing. Now, let's get in a time machine and go back for a moment. Let's go back to before even the Torah was given to Moses. Let's go back to the time after the flood, to Noah. Let's go back to Nimrod and Babylon, because this is her name, right? And so we're going to go back to that event where there is a one world language. And Nimrod, by the way, the depiction of Nimrod, he's the founder of Babylon. He was defiant before the Lord, a mighty hunter of souls. Keep that in mind, okay? He's an antagonist to the work of God. And so the originator, I guess you would say, of Babel or Babylon. And Babel, interesting, two different names or definition of names. We know that Babel can literally mean the gates of heaven or the gateway to God. And when we go back, we realize when the people had one language, they built a tower to get to heaven. And then God says, when man sets his mind to do something, it will be done. And so the solution to this was to confuse the language. And so now we don't have a common language anymore. So not only does Babel mean gateway to God, but it also means confusion, babble, right? People couldn't understand. They were completely confused. And so that work project came to a quick end. But again, you have to go back and remember the counterfeit plans of Satan. Remember, Satan himself, even going back to Eve in the garden, he's a liar from the beginning. He's a deceiver, but that counterfeit has to be closed, right? But that deception began when he tempted Eve and then lied by saying, did God surely say this? No, you won't die. For God knows that when you eat of this fruit, you will be like him. That's Satan's desire from the very beginning, to be like God, not to replace God, to be like God. And so she looked at it and she tasted it and she gave it to her husband. And this became, as you know, what ended the experience that God intended for man in the garden. And so now we have this desire to become like God, knowledge, wisdom, whatever that tree of wisdom and knowledge and life represented. And now Satan's going to work in order to deceive the world, because we even know back then that there's the first prophecy in Genesis 3, 15, 16, 17, something like that, that God talks about the virgin birth, the seed of the woman is going to crush the head of Satan. And so we begin his strategies. And so we have this antagonistic, counterfeit religious system. Nimrod, check this out, Nimrod is married to Semiramis. And then you have this mystical dark religion that's a copy of, because Semiramis, we're told, has a son called Tammuz, but it's a son that came from a virgin birth. A sunbeam hits Semiramis and she becomes pregnant with Tammuz. Tammuz then lives for 6 or 7 years and then is gored by a wild boar, but he is resurrected. And this religious system, you see the copy, you see the counterfeit, right? And so you see a virgin birth, even the pictures, ancient inscriptions, you see a Madonna figure with Semiramis. You see a halo and Tammuz, holding baby Tammuz with a crown and a halo as well. And so then all of a sudden this copy, this counterfeit, then Satan just needs to change names depending on what world empires there are, names that you're probably familiar with. So for Tammuz, well, of course, we know the original or the story of Jesus, but pagan son, virgin birth, Tammuz would go by the name depending on what culture was reigning. For Babylon, it would be Tammuz. For Assyria, it would be Hercules. For Greece, it would be Dionysus. And then for Semiramis, her name, Asherat, Aphrodite, that's the Greek name. Diana would be the Roman name. And so you can go on. So it's just pull and plug. It's plug in different titles, but it's still the counterfeit story of Mystery Babylon that once again seeks, and we're going to see that this entity, this false religion, is ultimately responsible for the blood of the saints the blood of the martyrs of Jesus and the blood of those during the tribulation period. So it's going to be eradicated. It's going to be wiped out in this chapter. And then verse 7, but the angel said to me, why do you marvel? Remember, John is dumbfounded by what he sees in the history of this false religion. Why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and the beast that carries her, which has, and now keep in mind, this angel's looking at John and saying, what's up, buddy? You look like you're lost here. Let me give you the explanation. And I'm sure as we're done reading this, John's looking at the angel and says, thanks a lot. Okay, so listen. The angel's going to explain, and he's going to say, I'm going to tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that you saw was and is not, and will ascend out of the bottomless pit and go to perdition. And those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast that was and is not and yet is. This beast, Antichrist, man of lawlessness. This description, remember, he survives. Remember the counterfeit nature of Satan. Remember the counterfeit nature of this satanic trinity. The Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, the satanic trinity, Satan, Antichrist, false prophet. False prophet, John the Baptist. Antichrist, just that, fake Christ. And Satan himself, who wants to be like God. And so this beast, we're told, survives, we went over this weeks ago, survives an assassination attempt. And then he's brought back to life. Now, this we know happens at that 3.5-year mark. And that's why I say that mystery religious Babylon has a timestamp. This religion is needed to prop up and to provide the foundations for the Antichrist reign. But at this 3.5-year mark, this assassination attempt where he appears to be dead and then comes back to life again, at this point in time, Antichrist does not need that religious system anymore, because he now is going to declare himself to be the object of all worship, declaring himself to be God. Now, I happen to believe that it's at this assassination attempt that the man, and I think the Antichrist, in every generation, I believe that Satan has somebody in mind to be the Antichrist, because he does not know the return of Jesus, the rapture of the church, etc. So he's got to be prepared. But I think this man, bottom line, he accepts the proposal that Satan gave Jesus in the wilderness after his baptism, when Satan said to Jesus, if you bow down to me, I will give you the kingdoms of this world. And remember, Jesus does not correct him and say, no, they're not yours to give. No, he doesn't do that. So we take from that he has the power to do that. And yet Jesus said, no, you only worship the Lord your God. I will not bow down. This man, this Antichrist, will accept that, will bow down. I don't know if this is partial possession. I don't know what happens. But this is what I believe. At that 3.5-year mark, at this assassination where he was not, the person that's resurrected is now fully controlled or possessed by Satan himself. And so he doesn't need the religious system. It's what he always wanted in the beginning. Remember, we're told that that his function as a cherub was as a worship leader. And then his jealousy was that he wanted the worship not just to be directed to God, but to himself, wanting to be like God. And so now he doesn't need any religious foundation. He wants all worship directed to him. And this is where we then have the mark of the beast. Identifying with him, if you fail to do that, payable by death. So this is what's transpiring. This is the beast that was and is not and yet is. Okay, well, hopefully we've got that one sorted out. But once again, bear with me. This angel's going to go on and John's going to be scratching his head. So verse 9 says, here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. Now remember, that's an idiom for powers or nations. The 7 heads are 7 powerful nations on which the woman sits. Verse 10, there are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen. 1 is, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short time. The beast that was and is not is himself also the 8th, and is of the 7, and is going to perdition. You got that? Okay, let's just take a moment. The counterfeit nature of this religious system going all the way back, and remember the atrocities of these world powers directed at the people of God, Israel. So the 7 movements, the 7 heads, the 7 mountains, 5 were said are fallen. We begin with Egypt, and we know the story of Pharaoh and the Passover. And then we go to Assyria, and we know the story of Sennacherib and Tiglath-Pileser and the barbaric nature of the Assyrian Empire. We know of Isaiah and Hezekiah and the surrounding of Jerusalem, and God intervenes. We know the story then of Babylon, because that nation had fallen. Babylon now takes over. And of course, that's Nebuchadnezzar. That's our boys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We won't bow. That's Daniel in the lion's den. And then we go and we have the conquest of Babylon by Cyrus the Great. And we have the Medo-Persian. And remember, through this, we have the Satan's attempt to annihilate the Jews is still the same. And so this will be the ending period of Haman, right? And wanting to destroy. And we've got Esther and Mordecai. So that's the contextual history of this movement. And then we have the last of the 5 that have fallen, because this was written during the time of Rome. And that's the Greek Empire. And that's Alexander the Great, who conquers the known world. And it's his desire that the world would all speak a common language. He would, quote, Hellenize the world. They would have a common language, which would be what? Greek, which was the language mostly speaking during the time of Jesus. He was successful in that. And then a common religion, and you look at this fake religion, this mystery Babylon. We plug and play here with names because it's Greek mythology gods that the Romans, when they take over, just plug and play different names in it, okay? So that's what's taking place here. Now, those are the 5 that are fallen. And the one that is, that's Rome number 1, because that's the time of John that he's writing. And so he says there's 7 kings, 5 have fallen. One is, that's 6, and the other has not yet come. That's going to be the rise of Rome 2, or the Antichrist government. That's going to be that still yet to come, as it says here. And that will be this government that I've talked about that's propped up by this false religion or whatever. But the time's going to come because he's going to come out of that and he was in it as the 7th. He'll come out of it as the 8th. And this is that last period where he demands worship, declaring himself to be God. So that's the kingdom of the beast for the last 3.5 years, the 8th. All right. Hope that makes sense. And now we get to find about the horns. And verse 12 says, remember now the 10 horns. We've talked about the 7 mountains and all of that. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet. That's important to note because that tells us this is future. These 10 horns that represent 10 kings have not received their kingdom yet. It appears that during the Antichrist reign, post-rapture, post-Ezekiel 38 and 39, that the world will be, in a sense, put into 10 different regions that will be ruled by these 10 kings. Okay? It says that the 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet, but they receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. These are of one mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast. These will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, for he's the Lord of lords, the King of kings, and those who are with him are called, chosen, and faithful. That's us, by the way. So as he's going through this, he has to insert that. These 10 kings, oh, you're looking a little freaked out here, John. Oh, keep in mind, the Lord of lords, the King of kings, the Lamb of God's going to destroy them. That sort of stuff. And he's going to reign with those that are with him. And that's us, the chosen, the faithful, the called. So in a sense, he eases that fear. But these 10 future reigns of the Antichrist, I've given you some descriptions of them in slide number 10. Again, don't go too deep here and have speculations are futile because we're told in the text these 10 kings don't have kingdoms yet. But there are those that have seen or planned in the pursuit of a global world government, globalism taking place, that what kind of regions could be put together. We've had this with with the euro, in a sense, where there's a common currency that crosses borders in Europe, as you know. It's called the euro. There has been plans over the year to do the same with North America, with Mexico and Canada and America, and call it the Amero. It hasn't gotten traction yet, but the idea is, what would these 10 regions look like? But as a reminder, their function is to rule with the beast, and then we're going to see what their focus is on Mystery Babylon, this counterfeit religion that spans the history just about of time. And so this is where we read, and then he said to me, this is verse 15, then he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. And they're past, and they're the present, and they're the future. And the 10 horns which you saw on the beast. These will, and notice, here's what they will do. These 10 kings, these 10 horns, these will hate the harlot, make her desolate and naked, eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to fulfill his purpose to be of one mind and to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman whom you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. So, for 3.5 years, the Antichrist will need this global religion to prop up and provide the foundation for his kingdom. But that comes to an end. The kings, the 10 kings, will eventually destroy the harlot. Keep in mind, the harlot's riding the beast. She's not the beast. But then, destruction of all things, the destruction of the beast comes as we move forward into the next chapters. Again, just a reminder of the power of religion, because it's going to be done away with. But still in our day, the power of religion, the destruction of religion. Keep in mind, it was never God's plan to create man to have religion. Man was created for what? Relationship. To be with him. That's why we were created, for fellowship with God. Because of the fall, religion then gets put in. The first religious act is Adam and Eve sewing their fig leaves together to try to cover themselves because they were so-called naked. And God would not accept that. And so we have the first sacrifice, blood atonement, as God provides skins for their clothing. Religion versus relationship. And as we look at it today, the opiate of the people, Islam, religion of death, right? Islam, well, what's going to happen to me? What if you die for Allah? Look at your rewards that you get. Pick your religion and find that it's going to bring comfort, intoxication. And then we look at the world in which we live in today. Is it surprising that the words of Zechariah are coming to fruition, that in the end of days that Jerusalem will be a stumbling block for all nations? I mean, let's look at Jerusalem. Let's look at the epicenter. Let's look at the Temple Mount. We have the Jews. Do you think the Jews are going to synchronize their religion and de-emphasize Yahweh? We have the Muslims. Do you think the Muslims are going to say, oh, it's not Allah Akbar anymore. There's room for others as well. Do you think Christians are going to give up or de-emphasize the King of Kings and Lord of Lords? So you have this great contention. Zechariah says it's a cup of trembling, and it's all religion. And so this is now going to come to an end. And that's what we've read about in this chapter. And the end comes about by man, those 10 kings. And now we have the Antichrist sitting on his throne, Satan personified, with the worship of what's left in the world. All right, so that takes care of religion. And now we're going to move into, again, the whorish religious system is taken care of, and now our focus, and it's a two-sided coin of Satan's counterfeit. Now, this chapter, chapter 18, is going to deal with the consummation of worldliness and materialism, i.e., the economic system of this world. So we have religion as an opium of the people. And then what's our focus in life? Where's our security? How should we live? What's that all about? And so now we have the injection of the Antichrist, of Satan himself, into the culture of the world, that our security is not in relationship with God, but our security will be found in materialism, what we possess, what our bank accounts might be, and the worldliness. And keep in mind, we don't choose things. There's a power in this world. When we think about, well, we'll get to that later. So let's now jump into this destruction of the consummation of this worldliness, this material system in our world, the economic system. And so, chapter 18, verse 1, after these things, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory. And he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and it's become a dwelling place of demons, a prison for every foul spirit, a cage for every unclean and hated bird. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. Now, man's destroyed the religious system that we read about, but God now is going to destroy the commercial and economic system that man has married himself to. Verse 4, and I heard another voice from heaven saying, and I think this is a word for us as well. The voice says, come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins. You know, it's hard to imagine, it's inconceivable that a child of God would be part of a religious Babylonian mystery religion, although there can be some elements that creep in. But this concept of worldliness and materialism and the economic system of our day, this commercial Babylon with its materialistic lure, is a constant threat for believers today to be guarded against. Come out from among them. Paul would write, do not let this world squeeze you into its mold, its culture, but be transformed by the word of God, by the Spirit of the Lord. So again, something we need to have ears to hear. Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, unless you receive of her plagues. For her sins have reached to heaven. Interesting picture there. Remember, we went back to Babylon, and what did they want to do? Build a tower that would reach the heavens. It failed. But here we read that the sins of man, of mystery Babylon, have reached to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Judgment. Render to her just as rendered to you. Repay her double according to her works. And the cup which she mixed double for her. In the measure that she glorified herself, she lived luxuriously. In the same manner give her torment and sorrow. For she says in her heart, I sit as a queen. I'm no widow. I will not see sorrow. Therefore her plagues will come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she will be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judges her. Warnings come out, materialism, worldliness. You know, Satan's got a trinity of things as well that have served him faithfully over the years, the decades, the millenniums. Money, power, and sex. The destruction of many believers. We're told, remember the story of Jesus when he warned against this materialism or worldliness or riches. His brother James speaks of it as well. But remember, Jesus, in the parable of the soils, he says, now the seed that fell among the thorns is he who hears the word, and the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and the result is he becomes unfruitful. We need to be aware of these warnings. The kings of the earth, well, before that, the riches, the deceitfulness of riches, the choking, the producing of unfruitfulness. Keep this in mind. Money is not evil. The love, the desire of it is the root of all evil. But money is not. Money can be a very useful servant, but a very cruel and evil master. So the kings of the earth, verse 9, who committed fornication and lived luxuriously with her, will weep, will lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance for fear of her torment, saying, alas, alas, the great city of Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. This system of materialism and worldliness producing the haves and the have-nots, the carrot that we're all after, thinking if we can get a little bit more, we'll be satisfied, we'll be secure. This false sense of security, be gone like that. Money. If money could provide happiness, then the clinics like Betty Ford's clinic that are filled with millionaires, it doesn't make sense if money can buy your happiness and security. Some of the most rich and famous people that are in these clinics, you know their names. In my generation, Elizabeth Taylor, Tony Curtis, Robert Downey Jr., Lindsay Lohan, Liza Minnelli, Jerry Lewis, Drew Barrymore. We can go on. People that have what the world says, if you've got this, you got it all. If you've got looks, and if you've got resources and materials and money, that equates to happiness. That is the system that God is going to destroy. That's the Babylonian worldliness material system that has been in place for the millennia. So, again, the merchants of the earth, they're going to weep and mourn over her, for no one buys their merchandise anymore. Merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and every kind of citron wood and every kind of object of ivory, every kind of object of the most precious wood, bronze, iron, and marble. Spices like cinnamon and incense, fragrant oils, frankincense, wine and oil, fine flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and chariots. And then it says, and bodies and the souls of men. The prophets of commercial Babylon have come through cruelly by devaluing human life and using others. It says that they sold the bodies and souls of men. The idea, even in this day, there's many applications, but what comes to the forefront is the widespread horrors of human trafficking today, prostitution, pornography. Let me just take a second and plug. If you haven't seen The Sound of Freedom, make sure you put it on your must-watch list. The children of God cannot be sold. They cannot be given a price. Babylon sold bodies and the souls of men. All of this, by the way, this whole system is about entrapment. Entrapment. The world system that's going to be destroyed dictates value in materialism. What you're wearing today, you didn't necessarily choose. This world, this Babylonian world materialistic entity dictated that for you. They're going to tell you the colors that are popular this year. They're going to tell you the styles of clothing that you're going to wear. You know, my generation, we didn't choose bell-bottom pants. The world said, yeah, this is for you right now. And then I went to what, you know, and when my boys were in high school, I kept looking at them and their pants started getting lower and lower and lower. And I kept thinking, pull up your pants. Mo, this is style. It's what everybody's doing. That's Babylon. That's the power of this entity that God is going to destroy. Well, we're running out of time, so let's finish this chapter off because it's time to climb out of this pit. The fruit that your soul longed for has gone from you, and all the things which are rich and splendid have gone from you, and you shall find them no more. The merchants of these things who became rich by her, they stand at a distance for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing and saying, alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, purple, scarlet, adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, for in 1 hour great riches came to nothing. Every shipmaster, all who travel by ship, sailors, and as many as trade on the sea, they stood at a distance and they cried out when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what is like this great city? It's come to an end, and remember, the power was not man. This is God himself that brings this to an end. And verse 19 says that those people that are mourning, they threw dust on their heads. They cried out, weeping and wailing and saying, alas, alas, that great city in which all who had ships on the sea, they became rich by their wealth, by her wealth. And then once again, for in 1 hour, she's made desolate. Isn't that true? Security systems, finances, like that. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her. The economic backbone of the world is gone in 1 hour. Last few verses. Then a mighty angel took a stone, like a great millstone, and threw it into the sea, saying, thus with violence the great city Babylon shall be thrown down, and shall not be found any more. The sound of harpists, musicians, flutists, trumpeters shall not be heard any more. No craftsman or any craft shall be found in you any more. And the sound of a millstone shall not be heard in you any more. The light of a lamp shall not shine in you any more. The voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall not be heard in you any more. For your merchants were the great men of the earth, not men and women of God, great men of the earth. For by your sorcery all the nations were deceived, and in her was found the blood of the prophets, blood of the saints, and all who were slain on the earth. At the end here, there's no more amusement. No harps, musicians, flutists, music, trumpeters. You know, it's interesting that amusement, muse actually means to think. And when you put an A in front of it, it negates it. It's interesting when you think about amusement means not to think. And this is all will be gone because of deception and sorcery. And as you know, sorcery is the Greek word pharmakia, which means to prepare drugs. The lure of commercial Babylon is like a drug addiction, and it's fed by deceptive advertising. Well, I'm out of time. Let me wrap it up. Religion, gone. Possessions, materialism, gone. Those were not what God intended. What God intended was relationships with. Money will never provide security or happiness. When Rockefeller was the richest man in the world, he was asked, how much money is enough? And he simply said, just $1 more. $1 more. Did you know the suicide rate among high-income individuals is now higher than all other demographics in the world? The more money, it seems like the more money you make, the more psychologically and chemically addicted you become to it, even more so than cocaine itself. The lure, the deception, the pursuit. And then 10 things that money can't buy. Manners, morals, respect, character, common sense, trust, patience, class, integrity, and finally, money can't buy love. Well, I'll end with this because I gave you my generation when I pulled out the Elizabeth Taylor and Tony Curtis stuff or whatever. Let me end with to try to pull in other generations. In the words of Bob Marley, okay? Money is numbers, and numbers never end. If it takes money to be happy, your search for happiness will never end. Security, relationship, contentment is found in a relationship with God and God alone. Draw near to Him. That's it for this week. God bless you. We've climbed out. I hope you continue to join us as we see the fruits of what's yet to come. Shalom.